Hi, this is Dr. Meg Bray from the Department of Geography, GIS, and Sustainability at the University of Northern Colorado. In this short lecture, I will be covering keywords and context analysis, a form of word-based analysis. Before we dive in, let's talk about the learning outcomes. First, we're going to define what a keywords and context analysis is and when you might want to use this type of analysis. It is not the best fit for all types of data or analysis, but it can work very well for certain types of analyses. Next, I will explain the strengths and weaknesses of using a keywords and context analysis and discuss some of the pitfalls of relying on such an approach. Next, we will go through an example where we inductively generate a keyword list. Sometimes we have pre-established lists of keywords that we can use. Other times, we rely on emergent words from our dataset, which is what we'll do in our example. I will also demonstrate how we can apply keywords as codes and then discuss theory building that helps explain the context in which these words appear. Finally, we will discuss when we might rely on hand versus machine-assisted coding. Let's begin by defining what a keywords and context analysis is. Generally, a keywords and context analysis begins by identifying keywords in textual data and then uses these keywords to analyze the underlying meaning in the text. Alternatively, we can ask the question, what does a keywords and context analysis do? A keywords and context analysis can help us answer the question, what are people talking about, and how are they talking about it? So, when is a keywords and context analysis useful? Most often, we use keywords and context analysis either to build a thick thematic analysis or we use it for thin thematic analysis. While it can be used when you have what Geertz called thin data, it is most suited to a quicker analysis that helps you move your larger thematic analysis forward. Here, we see an image of Gary Ryan and Thomas Weisner's foundational article, Analyzing Words in Brief Description: Fathers and Mothers Describe Their Children, from 1996. This article was one of the first times anthropological researchers focused on this type of word-based analysis. First, they point to the importance of excluding the most common terms in your language of analysis, such as the, and so on. Subsequently, they analyze descriptions of children based on the gender of the parent. When analyzed by gender of the parent, the analysis demonstrates that mothers focus on affective dimensions and relationships, while fathers tend to focus on achievements and individualistic traits. All right, let's talk through some key terms. Salience is our first key term. When we talk about salience in keywords and context analysis, it is different from how we talk about salience in linguistic anthropology. Here, we might be talking about the frequency with which a word occurs in the text. In this case, you might be counting the number of times a word or phrase occurs in an interview or across interviews. The higher the frequency, the more salient the word. You might also be looking for a distinguishing feature, term, or phrase. For example, when I conducted research in the Gulf Coast of the United States, people regularly talked about waiting on the next big one. If you're not familiar with the weather patterns of the Gulf Coast, they mean that they're waiting for the next Category 5 hurricane. Because this was a locally derived category that occurred multiple times in the text, it was salient. Patterning is our next key term. Here, we're looking for repetition of certain terms. We're not necessarily interested in the number of times a word is used, but rather how it is repeated. This can help us build toward the next two categories. Context is our next key term. While word counts are one type of word-based analysis, for keywords and context analysis, we need to consider the context in which words are used. It's important to think about the idea that it's a sentence, not a word. While words can be incredibly meaningful, the overall context allows us to understand what people are talking about. Finally, we want to think about the relationship between words and phrases. For example, when I was conducting research on emotional responses to climate change, women in the US often described feeling sad for the younger generation while also having hope that they would have the tools they needed to solve the problems they face. While I could have just counted the number of times people used the words sad and hope, the relationship between these words provided valuable insight into the gender dynamics regarding climate change and the younger generation. Let's work through an example. As with any analysis, the first thing we do with data is to read through it. These two quotes are part of a data set gathered in 2014 on emotional distress and climate change. I suggest you pause here to read the quotes for the first time. Having read the data once, we'll read it again. As you read it the second time, consider which words stand out. Jot down 2 to 3 of these words. Again, I suggest you pause here to read the quotes again and jot down your keyword list. Looking at your word list, are there words that seem salient? Are there patterns that you can detect? You'll have the opportunity to read the quotes one more time. Keep your keyword list in mind and think about how you would categorize the context here. And how would you describe the relationship between words? Here are the quotes one more time. Pause to read and think over the context and the relationship between words. This is one very short example of this type of exercise. When doing this as part of an analysis, you have the option to assemble a keyword list inductively, as you just did, by reading the text and picking out words that are salient or appear in patterns. Then, once you have that keyword list assembled, you can use lexical searches to code for those terms and look for the context and relationship between words. Alternatively, you can identify pre-established lists of words that are relevant for your data. That is what we did here. We found pre-established lists of emotion words and applied them to this dataset. We then analyzed the data for salience, patterns, context, and the relationship between words. The process of considering context and the relationship between words is what moves us toward theory building. Finally, we'll quickly discuss hand coding versus machine-assisted coding. Both options are feasible, but it is important to consider the pros and cons of each approach. When you have a small data set and perhaps a small budget, hand coding may be the preferred strategy. This can be prone to errors of omission, but this can be managed by having your analysis double-checked by a collaborator. If you have a large data set and perhaps a larger budget, machine-assisted coding can be very beneficial. Using lexical searches in MaxQDA, Atlas TI, or similar programs can cut down the amount of time that word-based coding takes, giving you more time to build your analysis. Regardless of which approach you take, you are still the analyst. The machine is not doing the bulk of the analysis for you. You must still make analytical choices that must be based on extensive reading of the data and insider and/or ethnographic knowledge. I hope this gives you a start on keywords and context analysis. I look forward to seeing how you use this method of analysis.